Imagine a city that stood for over 1,000 years, a bastion of civilization and faith, the heart of an empire. This was Constantinople, the jewel of the Byzantine Empire, protected by walls once thought to be unbreakable. But in 1453, a new power rose from the east, armed with a technology that would change the face of warfare forever. This is the story of the siege that didn't just topple an empire, but shattered the medieval world and unknowingly lit the fuse for the Renaissance. The year is 1453, and the fate of the world hangs in the balance. The mighty Theodosian Walls had defended Constantinople for a millennium. They were a masterpiece of defensive engineering, a triple-layered system of moats, outer walls, and a formidable inner wall studded with towers. For centuries, they had repelled every foe, from Avars and Arabs to Bulgars and Rus. To the defenders, these walls were more than just stone and mortar. They were a symbol of divine protection, a testament to the enduring power of the Roman legacy. The city had faced over 20 sieges in its long history, and each time, the walls had held firm. However, the Byzantine Empire of the 15th century was a shadow of its former glory. Once a sprawling power that dominated the Mediterranean, it had been reduced to little more than the city of Constantinople itself in a few scattered territories. Its population had dwindled, and its coffers were empty. The final emperor, Constantine XI Palaiologos, was a brave and determined leader, but he commanded a meager force, could only muster around 7,000 soldiers, including a few hundred skilled Genoese mercenaries, to defend nearly 14 miles of walls. It was a daunting, almost impossible task. Across the Bosporus Strait, a new and ambitious ruler had his eyes set on the ultimate prize. Sultan Mehmed II of the Ottoman Empire was just 21 years old, but he possessed a brilliant military mind and an unshakable will. He saw Constantinople not just as a strategic conquest, but as his destiny. Mehmed believed that capturing the city was the key to consolidating his empire and proving his greatness. He spent 2 years meticulously planning his assault, gathering a massive army estimated to be between 80,000 and 120,000 strong. But his greatest advantage wasn't just numbers. Mehmed embraced a revolutionary new weapon, the cannon, commissioned a Hungarian engineer named Orban to construct a series of massive bombards, the likes of which the world had never seen. The largest of these was a true monster, a super cannon over 27 feet long that could hurl a 1,200-pound stone ball over a mile. These weren't the small soldiers and banners stretched as far as the eye could see. Then came the sound. A thunderous roar that shook the very foundations of the ancient city. Mehmed's great cannons began their relentless bombardment. Day after day, the giant stone balls smashed into the millennium-old walls. Each impact sent shockwaves through the city, shattering stone and morale. The defenders worked tirelessly under a constant hail of fire, frantically trying to repair the breaches with barrels of earth, wood, and rubble. They fought with incredible courage, but it was a desperate race against time and technology. While his cannons pounded the land walls, Mehmed also had to contend with the city's naval defenses. Constantinople's harbor, the Golden Horn, was protected by a massive iron chain stretched across its mouth, preventing the Ottoman fleet from entering. The Byzantine and Italian ships inside the harbor were outnumbered, but they were taller and better armed for close-quarters naval combat. They successfully repelled several attempts by the Ottoman navy to break the chain. Frustrated by this obstacle, Mehmed conceived one of the most audacious plans in military history. If he couldn't sail his ships into the Golden Horn, he would take them overland. He ordered his engineers to build a greased log road over the hill of Galata. In a single night, his men, with the help of oxen, dragged over 70 ships overland and into the waters of the Golden Horn, completely bypassing the defensive chain. For the defenders, waking up to see an enemy fleet suddenly in their protected harbor was a devastating psychological blow. The city was now completely surrounded. For 53 days, the siege raged on. The defenders, led by their emperor and the Genoese commander Giovanni Giustiniani, fought with a valor that astounded their enemies. They repelled multiple large-scale assaults, holding the crumbling walls against overwhelming odds. Constantine XI was everywhere, rallying his men, personally leading countercharges and working alongside them to repair the breaches. He was no longer just an emperor in a palace. He was a soldier fighting for the survival of his city and his people. Inside the city, fear mingled with faith. The citizens prayed for a miracle, for a divine intervention, like the ones that had saved their city in the past. But as the walls crumbled and supplies dwindled, hope began to fade. Sultan Mehmed grew impatient. His cannons had punched massive holes in the Theodosian Walls, particularly near the St. Romanus Gate, but the defenders' fierce resistance had prevented a breakthrough. He offered Constantine a final chance to surrender. He could leave the city with his people and possessions, or face the consequences of a final, allowed assault. Constantine's reply was resolute. He would not and could not surrender the city. He would defend it to the last of his strength. The die was cast. On the night of May 28th, an eerie silence fell over the battlefield. The relentless cannon fire ceased. The Ottoman camp was quiet as the soldiers rested and prepared for the final attack. Inside Constantinople, the air was thick with dread. A final Christian service was held in the great cathedral of Hagia Sophia. Orthodox and Catholic defenders, who had been divided by centuries of religious schism, put aside their differences and prayed together. Emperor Constantine XI received communion and asked for forgiveness from his people, knowing this was their last night on earth. Just after midnight on May 29th, the assault began. A deafening roar of drums, trumpets, and war cries erupted as tens of thousands of Ottoman soldiers charged the walls in waves. The first wave consisted of irregular troops, meant to absorb the initial defense and exhaust the defenders. The Byzantines and their allies held their ground, cutting down the attackers who tried to scale the rubble-filled breaches. After 2 hours, the first wave was repelled, but there was no respite. The second wave, composed of better-equipped Anatolian troops, crashed against the defenses. The fighting was brutal and hand-to-hand, a desperate struggle in the darkness amidst the ruins of the once mighty walls. Still, the defenders held. Finally, Mehmed unleashed his elite troops, the Janissaries. These were the best soldiers in the Ottoman army, disciplined, fearless, and utterly loyal to the Sultan. They advanced with grim determination, pushing towards the weakest section of the wall. At this critical moment, disaster struck the defenders. The Genoese commander, Giustiniani, was gravely wounded. His withdrawal from the front line caused a panic and a temporary collapse in the command structure. It was in this moment of confusion that some Ottoman soldiers discovered a small, unlocked gate, a poster known as the Kirkaporta. They poured through the opening, raised the Ottoman banner on a nearby tower, and began attacking the defenders from behind. Simultaneously, the Janissaries finally overwhelmed the main defenses at the St. Romanus breach. The cry went up, "The city is taken." Panic seized the remaining defenders as they realized they were being attacked from both front and rear. The organized defense collapsed into a desperate fight for survival. Emperor Constantine XI, seeing that all was lost, cast aside his imperial regalia and led his last remaining men in a final hopeless charge into the sea of oncoming enemies. His body was never definitively found. The last Roman emperor died as he had lived, fighting for his city, and the 1,000-year-old Byzantine Empire was no more. The fall of Constantinople was an event that sent shockwaves across the known world. It marked a definitive end to the Middle Ages. The last living remnant of the Roman Empire was gone, and a new formidable power, the Ottoman Empire, now controlled the gateway between Europe and Asia. The immediate consequence was a disruption of the old trade routes. European nations, now cut off from the lucrative overland spice and silk trades, were forced to seek new sea routes to the east. This necessity fueled the age of discovery, leading explorers like Columbus and Vasco da Gama to chart new worlds. But perhaps the most profound impact was intellectual. As the city fell, thousands of Byzantine scholars, artists, and thinkers fled westward, primarily to Italy. They carried with them a priceless cargo: ancient manuscripts and a deep knowledge of classical Greek and Roman literature, philosophy and science that had been largely lost to Western Europe. This influx of knowledge and classical ideas helped ignite the smoldering embers of the Italian Renaissance. The rediscovery of classical thought challenged medieval dogma, promoted humanism, and sparked an unprecedented explosion of art, science, and creativity that would reshape European civilization. The military tactics themselves marked a turning point. The siege proved that even the most formidable medieval fortifications were obsolete in the face of gunpowder artillery. This realization fundamentally changed warfare and architecture, accelerating the decline of the feudal knight and the rise of centralized states with professional, gunpowder-armed armies. The fall of a single city changed the map, rewired global trade, transformed warfare, and kick-started a cultural rebirth that defined the modern era. It was the end of one world and the violent, spectacular birth of another. Thank you for watching. The story of our shared past is filled with these pivotal moments that continue to shape our world today. If you found this journey into history compelling, be sure to subscribe to Historical Repo for more stories like this.